Doug Weiss, a Baptist preacher most people had never heard of, sat down with Joni Lamb 3 months before she said, "I do," and wrote her a letter. He had no intimate acquaintance with her. He had no connection to the Lamb family, no inside knowledge of Daystar, and no place at any decision-making table. What he possessed was a public chronology, a basic understanding of Texas family law, and the belief that someone had to speak up about what everyone in Johnny's immediate vicinity appeared inclined to keep quiet. "You know, he has been nothing but a blessing to me, an incredible husband. The month that I've been married to him, he doesn't want to take over Daystar. I think really the fear here is not that he would interfere in Daystar. I think the fear is that somehow they think they're losing something by him coming, but that's a lie from the enemy. It's just not true." He advised her to obtain a prenuptial agreement that would benefit her. He instructed her to keep her money entirely apart from his. He instructed her to make sure Doug Weiss was aware that he was a visitor and not Daystar's owner, and to ensure that he maintained his own home as a backup plan. Then, on June 10th, 2023, 3 months later, Joni Lamb wed Doug Weiss. In any case, a word about sourcing before we continue. A filed deed, an authenticated expense report, an identified publication, or a validated court record is the source of every financial number, legal document, and documented timeline in this movie. The Roy's Report, Texas statutes, the Trinity Foundation's property study, and Joni Lamb's own public remarks serve as the main sources in this case. There is nothing in this video that isn't backed up by those sources. Allegations are recognized as such. Documents that have been filed are recognized as such. The distinction is important. The letter, now. An open letter addressed directly to Joni Lamb was published in March 2023 by Daniel White III, a clergyman who leads a ministry called Gospel Light Society International. White does not practice law. He does not work as a financial advisor. He is a preacher who saw a public timeline develop, including the announcement of Doug Weiss's engagement just 1 year after Marcus Lamb's death in November 2021, and the fact that he was still legally married to his wife of about 30 years, Lisa, at the time of the announcement. He concluded that someone with a platform needed to clearly state what the situation required. Although there was a theological issue in what White wrote, it was not the main one. It was useful guidance. "Get a prenuptial agreement in your favor," he advised Johnny. "Keep your money completely apart from his. Inform him up front that he will not be taking over for Marcus Lamb as Daystar's CEO. He ought to be a visitor, not the proprietor. And, just in case, make sure he maintains his own home. It's worth spending the most time with that final sentence, just in case." White did not anticipate a betrayal or a hostile takeover. He was outlining, virtually step by step, the fundamental legal safeguards that any knowledgeable family law lawyer would advise someone getting married into a multi-decade family ministry that had already amassed tens of millions of dollars. In the months that followed, he published follow-up articles, all of which arrived before the wedding date and presented the same point in slightly different wording. This marriage is progressing quickly. This dude doesn't have any similar possessions. This partnership will inevitably fall apart if no legal foundation is put in place. This particular detail, which completely alters the frame, merits the most direct attention in this film. Almost all discussions of White's letter have focused on how it warned Joni Lamb about her own exposure. The frame is not complete. In Texas, a prenuptial agreement is a two-way street. Both individuals are equally protected by it. Both parties must sign it. Both parties must provide complete financial disclosure. It establishes a clear, mutually agreeable, and enforceable boundary on who owns what prior to marriage. In the absence of one, the legal default does not inquire as to who is entitled to what. It uses a formula outlined in Section 3.003 of the Texas Family Code. It is assumed that any property owned by either spouse during the marriage is communal property, Who constructed it first, who earned it, or what each spouse secretly believed the arrangement to be are all irrelevant to that calculation. Unless a signed document specifies otherwise, it just counts what was obtained during the marriage and treats it as shared. Therefore, Doug Weiss was not merely taking a chance that Joni may claim a portion of his assets when he entered into this marriage without a prenuptial agreement on file. Additionally, he was entering a legal structure that would not protect him from Joni using the estate planning tools available to her as an individual property owner to draw extremely precise lines around particular assets at any time and without his signature, nor would it provide him with a documented basis for his own potential claims on anything acquired jointly during the marriage. Almost little coverage of this marriage has explicitly stated such. There was more to the warning than just keeping Joni safe from Doug. In a community property state, an undocumented marriage is a gray area that both partners enter together. Furthermore, Joanie Lamb was not the one who never cared to clarify their own place within it. Doug Weiss was the one. Heart to Heart Counseling Center was founded by psychologist Doug Weiss in Colorado Springs. What happens to couples that are improperly protected, improperly communicated, and improperly constructed is the focus of his entire professional identity. He has authored several books about betrayal, marriage, sexual addiction, and repairing after a breakdown in trust. Over the course of more than 20 years, he has sat across from couples experiencing a professional crisis and guided them through the emotional and financial ruins of partnerships that were never properly defined or documented. He is one of the most qualified individuals in America by profession when it comes to knowing the true expenses of an ill-prepared, undocumented marriage. That this makes him a villain is not the purpose. The idea is that one of the most notable professional blind spots in the entire narrative is his inability to establish his own place within this marriage. A driving teacher is operating a stop sign. A cardiologist who neglects to do a stress test. As confirmed by the Roy's report and the Trinity Foundation in March 2025, Doug Weiss entered a community property state, married into a media ministry, and left the paperwork, as far as any public record reveals, completely unfinished. His assets were verified by independent property research at roughly $11.7 million in real estate, alone across 7 properties in 4 states. In order to grasp the practical implications of this marriage's undocumented status, let's discuss the money in verified terms. After Marcus Lamb passed away in November 2021, Joni became the president of Daystar Television Network in 2022. According to an internal Daystar salary document that the Roy's report was able to obtain and publish, her total compensation increased by 140% in that year alone, from $436,750 in 2021 to $1,048,200 in 2022. This is more than 3 times the salary of CFO Arnold Torres, the next highest paid Daystar employee, who made $300,000. According to the same record, Joni's son and later Vice President Jonathan Lamb made $199,000 that year. Joni's daughter, Director of Communications Rachel Lamb Brown, made $190,000. Doug Weiss started earning a 6-figure salary from the network after he married into the Daystar family. Jonathan Lamb confirmed this to the Roy's report, pointing out that Weiss had no prior experience with the ministry and no board mandate approving his position. The couple paid $2.9 million for a Gulfront property in Miramar Beach, Florida, close to Destin, within 3 months after their June 2023 wedding. This was verified by a warranty deed that the Roy's report received from the Trinity Foundation, which described a 4-bedroom, 4-bathroom apartment in a gated building with semi-private lifts, a private heated pool, and a balcony over 350 square feet facing the Gulf. Unless a formal agreement specifies otherwise, property acquired during a marriage bears a default of shared ownership under the Texas Family Code's community property presumption, regardless of whose money was used to purchase it. In the months that followed, that condo could have been the most obvious representation of Doug Weiss's financial success from the marriage. After Joni's passing, it was cited by numerous sources as proof of how completely he had landed. There was already a documented financial dispute prior to the wedding, which merits careful consideration since it directly relates to how this union managed finances from the beginning. Joni charged around $100,000 to her Daystar credit card at Las Ventanas al Paraíso, a posh resort in Los Cabos, Mexico, where the couple honeymooned in July 2023, according to two Daystar spending reports that the Roy's report was able to obtain. Months before the wedding, the first item, $36,780.32, was paid in advance and showed up on her October 2022 expense report. The charge was accompanied by a note that said, Joni Lamb and Mr. Doug Weiss. Her May 2023 expense report for the same resort showed a second charge of $60,000 and 41.68 with a similar remark. The overall cost of the honeymoon, including food, beverages, and gratuities, was almost $138,000, according to an itemized resort bill that the Roy's report was able to get. Joni openly disputed that her honeymoon was funded by any Daystar funds. Not one penny of Daystar's money was used for our honeymoon, she stated in a December 2024 social media video. Daystar said that all personal charges on company cards were fully repaid in response to the Roy's report's inquiry. However, Daystar failed to supply documentation of that repayment and its date when the Roy's report requested it. At a Daystar board meeting in August 2023, Jonathan Lamb, who was in charge of approving cost reports at the time, told the Roy's report that he opposed to the honeymoon expenses. He added that in response, board member Tom Callander decided to give Joni from Daystar the about $100,000. Neither the gift nor any subsequent compensation have been made public. According to the Trinity Foundation, the Daystar aircraft also made 24 round-trip flights between Fort Worth, Texas, and Colorado Springs, Colorado, where Doug Weiss resided, between October 2022 and May 2024. During that time, the aircraft also completed 13 round trips between Fort Worth and the Destin, Florida region. The Trinity Foundation predicted that those flights would cost a total of $769,220. This is the financial setting in which the marriage functioned. There are unanswered questions regarding reimbursement for a six-figure honeymoon that was charged to a ministry credit card. An independent nonprofit watchdog found evidence of $769,220 in jet travel. 3 months after the wedding, the couple bought a $2.9 million beach house together. Beneath all of this, there was no formal written description of who owned what, nor was there a prenuptial or postnuptial agreement on file. Now, for the portion of this narrative that nearly all media outlets have underreported, it is necessary to examine what occurred to those assets during Joanie Lamb's last months, rather than what Doug Weiss acquired in this marriage. The resources accessible to a married person who decides to safeguard separate property without the involvement of their spouse are detailed in the Texas Family Code. A prenuptial agreement must be signed freely by both partners and include complete financial disclosure. In addition to the marriage vow itself, a post-nuptial agreement calls for the exchange of something of value. These two are reciprocal tools. They need to be discussed. They need to be negotiated. They demand attendance, disclosure, and consent from both parties. A revocable trust is not the same. Any individual property owner may unilaterally create a revocable trust at any moment without the other spouse's knowledge, signature, or intervention from the court. Likewise, a quitclaim deed is unilateral. It moves the filing party's ownership stake in a particular piece of property into a new legal organization, in this case, the filing party's own trust. The agreement of the other spouse is not necessary. There is no need for prior notice. It needs to be filed, notarized, and signed. Joanie Lamb filed a quitclaim deed on the Miramar Beach, Florida condominium in March 2026, about 8 weeks prior to her passing on May 7, 2026. With a single unilateral legal filing, the property that had served as the most obvious representation of what Doug Weiss had married into for almost 3 years was transferred from any unclear jointly held status into Joanie Lamb's personal revocable trust. Doug Weiss's name was removed from the asset through an estate planning process that any individual property owner can use on their own. She was able to do this because there was never a mutual written agreement that defined his claim to the asset in the first place, not through a divorce process or a negotiated settlement. This whole narrative revolves around that distinction. Joanie Lamb could not have arbitrarily taken away his interest in that property if there had been a prenuptial agreement, if Doug Weiss had followed Daniel White's advice in spirit, if not in writing, and insisted on a formal mutual agreement establishing their separate roles. A prenuptial agreement gives both parties clear, enforceable rights that neither can easily revoke by going to the notary alone. A husband who has genuine legal ownership of a jointly owned property does not lose it due to a trust transfer in which he did not appear to have any influence. A husband who never gained that foundation in the first place does. The verified record cannot overlook the additional layer that the filing's timing adds. The administrative date of March 2026 was not chosen at random. It coincides with the same period that Daystar's own statement, released on the day of Joanie's passing, described as when her health had already deteriorated significantly. According to Daystar's official announcement on May 7, 2026, Joanie had been suffering with major health issues that she had chosen to handle in private, which were made worse by a recent back injury. She passed away at her Bedford, Texas, home. Her age was 65. Daystar never publicly acknowledged or refuted the Trinity Foundation's documented study of her property holdings, which was released prior to her death and claimed that bone cancer might have been one of her private health problems. According to the record, the woman who signed the quitclaim document in March 2026 had good reason to think, or at the very least, reason to suspect, that time might be running out. Furthermore, she didn't hold a family meeting, make a public statement, or significantly alter her estate plan as her first recorded estate planning action after realizing this. Her husband's implicit stake in one particular high-value asset was removed by a discreet, unilateral deed. That administrative detail is not impartial. It's a choice. Additionally, decisions made by individuals who think they could be dying about who is protected and who is not typically reflect the most accurate knowledge about their true beliefs about the people in their final months. A video that presents only one viewpoint is not doing any research. Thus, it is worth stopping here to give Doug Weiss a fair framing. It is pursuing legal action. There is a less ominous version of this tale. Prenuptial agreements are avoided by many couples, especially wealthy ones, not for strategic reasons, but rather because it is uncomfortable for people to plan for a marriage's dissolution before it has even started. A revocable trust designating a spouse as beneficiary can serve as a perfectly appropriate replacement for a formal marital agreement in a stable long-term marriage, sending assets to the surviving partner without the discomfort of prenuptial negotiations, according to some financial experts. If Joanie and Doug had a private agreement based on the trust that underpins all marriages, it would not be documented in a public document. Lack of documentation does not prove bad faith. It is evidence of danger. However, the very purpose of a written agreement is to endure the point at which private understanding ends, whether that point is due to a falling out, a change of heart, or a health decline that neither party anticipated would occur so quickly. The proven fact that Joni Lamb moved a $2.9 million property out of any unclear shared status and into a structure she alone owned in the last weeks of her life remains unresolved. And it was precisely because there had never been a written mutual agreement defining what her husband's claim to it was that she was able to do it discreetly, neatly, and without any apparent legal objection from his side. According to the Trinity Foundation's reporting on Johnny's estate-related activities during her last year, she managed other assets as well. 3 of Joni's 7 recorded properties were sold in the final year of her life, while the remaining 4 were put into trusts. This was a trend that Trinity Foundation specifically recorded as preparation for an orderly death, avoiding probate and allocating assets without judicial supervision. In October 2025, her long-term home in Colleyville, Texas, was sold. Additionally, a property in Taylors, South Carolina, and a lake house in Granbury, Texas, were sold. 4 residual properties were put into trust structures: the condo in Miramar Beach prior to the quitclaim deed, a house being built in Colleyville, the house in Granbury Brazos River, and the house in Macon, Georgia. As the Trinity Foundation pointed out, Joni's own Daystar Legacy Stewardship page outlines reasons to establish estate trusts, such as protecting privacy, prohibiting certain individuals from getting assets, and guaranteeing that property belongs to people of your choosing rather than the state. These are the justifications for estate planning given by Joni Lamb's own ministry. They read more than just boilerplate when applied to her own assets in the latter months of her life. This means that, as of the time of this video, none of the answers to the questions that the majority of people still have, such as how much of Joni's estate Doug Weiss will eventually receive, whether her will has been filed, and what the trust documents say about distributions to her 3 children, Jonathan, Rachel, and Rebecca, are available to the public. A probated will or a public financial filing have not verified the $40 million total estimated worth of Johnny's estate, which has been extensively reported by media outlets. Daystar is exempt from filing Form 990 disclosures that would divulge compensation and asset levels to the public because it is a religious organization. The investigative floor, or the verified minimum of what this estate comprises, is what the Trinity Foundation and the Roy's report have recorded through property records, salary paperwork, jet travel logs, and spending reports. The entire ceiling is still hidden. The structural lesson at the heart of this tale is not private. The same lesson also reappears in this family's recorded history, but through an entirely different legal document and a very different relationship. Johnny's son, Jonathan Lamb, held the position of vice president at Daystar for many years as part of a succession plan that his father Marcus had set up, designating him as Joni's eventual successor. He was the apparent heir to the network his parents had established. On November 16, 2024, the day after the Roy's report contacted Daystar for comment on its investigation, Jonathan was fired due to the escalating conflict between him and his mother regarding Joni's marriage to Doug Weiss. A board meeting in November 2023 that was recorded and subsequently given to the Roy's report, and an NDA Jonathan refused to sign. His pay had already been cut in the weeks prior to that dismissal. Daystar's head of security, Shannon Kelly, had installed a GPS tracking device in his company car. This was verified when a mechanic discovered the device in the trunk the day after Jonathan saw Kelly putting something in his car on security tape. A private investigator was brought in to keep an eye on Jonathan's relatives. There was no contractual protection for him to rely on when he was fired. There were no clear written conditions outlining his rights as Marcus Lamb's designated successor, what severance he was entitled to, or how he would be removed. Nothing had been secured beforehand, and his story's conclusion was determined by the person in charge of the pen at the end. There is a single structural failure that lies beneath 2 individuals, 2 relationships, and 2 distinct legal documents. Nothing was predetermined, Everything depended on the goodwill and intentions of the person in charge at the time the partnership broke down. A board meeting and a letter of termination taught Jonathan Lamb that lesson the hard way. Doug Weiss discovered it through a quitclaim deed that a dying woman submitted 8 weeks before to her demise. The March 2023 letter from Daniel White was not a complex legal brief. It was a pastor who studied a public timeline and came to the same conclusion as a family law lawyer at a free initial consultation. In writing, defend yourself. Make the terms clear. Don't rely just on mutual understanding and goodwill in the most important financial relationship of your life. Because when one of the parties is no longer present to clarify what was agreed upon and when, private understanding cannot endure a crisis unscathed. Joanie Lamb never followed White's advice to the fullest extent, nor did she do it in a way that formally safeguarded her husband's position. Her spouse never took action to safeguard his own, and only one of them had a document with any legal weight when the test finally arrived, not a divorce, not a public altercation, but a slow deterioration in health and the unique clarity that comes when time runs out. Joni was the one who used it. Was Joanie Lamb using that quitclaim deed to shield her children's inheritance from a husband she had become suspicious of during her last months? Was it a dying woman attempting to protect a particular asset from the succession dispute that she knew was already destroying her family? Was it just standard estate planning, no darker than what her own ministry's website suggested to its donors? If those questions ever come up, the private trust documents will eventually address them. Additionally, this video will not pretend otherwise by drawing a conclusion that is not yet supported by the public record. The public record is more helpful than all of those narratives put together, but it is also more limited than any of them. 3 months prior to the wedding, he received a written warning in public that was specific enough to outline the type of unilateral asset protection he would face 3 years later. The documentation that would have addressed that caution was never submitted, and only a quitclaim deed appeared when it came time to see if anything had been put in writing to protect either of them. There was only one name on it. He didn't own it. Subscribe to this channel if you think ministries should be held to the same level of financial transparency that they request from their contributors. The story is still being told. As long as there remain filed documents to review, we will continue to monitor the estate, the succession, and the board that has yet to formally select its own members. See you in the future video.